Assalamu alaikum. I'm Imam Dai Abdullah, the director of LGBT Outreach Program at Muslims for Progressive Values. In this video, we're going to talk about how sexuality was responded to politically in various different parts of our history, and how that impacted sexual minorities in our communities. Jewish, Christian, and Muslim cultures have been greatly influenced by many other cultures, and that has had a large influence on the understanding of sexual identity, gender identity, and non-heteronormative spaces in their communities. With homosexuality in particular, we see a growing number of Muslims borrowing from various and diverse cultural ideologies about the issues and applying them as an Islamic viewpoint. Of course, this includes the medical response to sexual improprieties in the Muslim community in the various historical periods of our community. In the 7th century Islam, new innovations came in terms of how to best deal with new people. Because Islam was growing, they needed to make sure that they sent an attractive message to the masses. One of these attractive things presented itself in the form of hospitals, which was an extension of the Islamic legal standard maslahah, for the public good. For example, because the empire was growing and was dealing with all that dealt with war, the soldiers who lost limbs or who got traumatized would be able to have new hope and a second chance in life by being reintroduced into society with new skills. This is why in the early Islamic period, hospitals served as both a place to find physical healing as well as mental healing. Another attractive thing that the Muslims did, which is related to mental health and politics, was that they had found a place for the previous peoples to become a part of their new society. Whereas other religions were prosecuting new peoples, Islam had found a way for minorities to participate in the growth of the young empire. During the Islamic Golden Age, which started just 60 years after the Prophet's death, was able to introduce mental hospitals by having Jewish and Christian minorities translate texts from previous cultures, such as Persian, Roman, Greek, and even Egyptian. This type of political genius allowed Islam to grow rapidly all around the areas of the original Muslim community, from Africa to Europe and all in between. Of course, by that time, mental health had been politicized. For example, mentally unstable soldiers or men who had been very violent were politicized and made into heroes. With that in mind, you can understand why being a homosexual was not desirable. For example, Al-Alamin, the Abbasid Caliph, was accused of being mad simply because he was in a homosexual relationship and did not want to hide his love for his male lover and confidant. This means that mental health and sexuality were both politicized. Another attractive thing that Islam had done, because these lands had already gone through wars between the Byzantine Christians and Persians, there was a lot of psychological scarring that Islam could heal. And as doctors, both Jewish and Christian, could participate in the healing of the overall community, which is why there was mainly a harmonious period for all faithfuls. During the last 300 years of the Ottoman Empire, under the direction of the Caliphate, there were significant political and life-altering changes made. Improvements included an increase in general education standards, the promotion of education for women, non-Muslims were given equal status with Muslims, and the separation of secular laws from religious laws, thus limiting the importance of Sharia courts within the empire. Such punishments as amputations, stoning, and apostasy were no longer allowed. In 1858, homosexuality was decriminalized throughout Muslim lands, and surprisingly had major support from Muslim religious leaders of that time. The Caliphate was promoting a progressive and secular vision for Muslim society, as well as trying to bring the Muslim community in alignment with the modern world. During the same period, homosexuality was still illegal in the majority of the Western European countries. Further, criminalization of homosexuality would once again return to former Ottoman Empire countries because of European colonialism. Similarly, we can see how the same type of secularization that led to the decriminalization of homosexuality would later be employed in various other communities in Western societies. Today, this process continues through the efforts of various mainstream Islamic scholars who reject the hijacking of the faith with cultural limitations and who highlight the process that has occurred every 150 years or so, which is the revival and reformation of the faith to meet the demands of the living community. In the meantime, we also have a growing number of scholars who identify as both homosexual and Muslim and are not afraid to tackle issues important to both sides of their identities. This type of scholarship allows us as Muslims, whether mainstream or sexual minorities, to be able to learn from a new group of scholars who can help us better understand these interconnected issues. These types of scholars are also able to refute the political response on homosexuality through mental health. In conclusion, we can see how Islam had become one of the most successful faiths in the world by appealing to human history in various parts of its history. For example, when we look at the early part of Islam, one thing that stands out is how this new faith had presented new ways to conquer people without destroying their dignity. In the Middle Periods, or what we would call the Islamic Golden Age, we can see the faith had strengthened itself by bringing in more knowledge from other societies through the employment of their Christian and Jewish brothers. In the Ottoman Empire, the last caliphate, we can see how the modernization of Islam was a clear possibility through the secularization envisioned by the Turks. Of course, that doesn't mean everyone was happy about this vision. We can see how later on, through colonization, some member states that belonged to the Muslim Empire were able to backtrack their ideas on homosexuality by accepting the colonial laws against homosexuality. This type of communal dialogue continues today amongst the various scholars, both of sexual minorities and mainstream, and are challenging the interconnectedness of culture and religion, and are able to call for a more scientific study on sexual and gender identities.